Hello and welcome to Small Business Snippets, the podcast from smallbusiness.co.uk. I'm your host, Anna Jordan. We're looking at small business milestones, those real defining moments for an entrepreneur, like landing your first client, launch date, and navigating your first major setback. Today's episode features Helena Murphy, co-founder of Raising Partners, an investment consultancy helping businesses to secure funding through angel networks, venture capitalists, and crowdfunding. We're going back in time to talk about her struggles in funding a previous business, leading to stress-related alopecia. Hi, Helena.
Hi, Anna.
How are you doing?
I'm very well.
Great. Is this your first podcast?
It's not. I actually used to have my own podcast.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, which we're currently in the process of restarting. So hopefully by the time this one comes out, we'll have some kind of plan in motion for it. But yeah, I do love podcasts. It's actually the main way that I consume all of my information for sort of inspiration in business. I really think they're really convenient. Yeah, I love them. So I'm really excited to be here.
Nice. So tell us a bit more about these difficulties that you had and how it led to alopecia as a result.
Okay, so it's a pretty colourful story, my background as an entrepreneur. I guess I first started out when I was 16. I ran a pretty successful eBay business where I was buying clothes at retail price and then selling them for a markup on eBay to the American market, which sounds pretty ruthless when I say it back. But it was really successful. I made quite a lot of money. I funded my way through university and it was great. And then I kind of got there and I'd done so well on eBay that I kind of thought, I don't want to pay these big eBay listing fees. I don't need to do that. I'm going to start my own e-commerce site. How difficult can it be? Little did I know. And I totally underestimated things like how much traffic eBay was driving to my business, and I wasn't paying for any marketing, and I was essentially just making pure profit. But I didn't appreciate that aged 18. Anyone listening who has any experience of running an e-commerce business will know just how laughable that concept is. And I built my own site on a then very primitive version of WooCommerce and set up what was then called September Street, which was my own e-commerce platform, essentially doing what I was doing on eBay. But, I could keep all of the profit. And I quickly learned that was definitely not the best route to go down and how much money I would need to launch a platform like that. And that was my first experience of thinking, right, actually, I'm going to need to raise some money for this. And because I'd seen some initial really early success, I was very fortunate. And in hindsight, it was a very small amount, but I raised £20,000 and thought I was the richest person on the planet. And this money came from an angel investor that I'd basically sold my dream to. I'd put together a pitch. I think I ended up pitching to him about 3 minutes. I put together maybe 6 or 7 slides on like why this was the best thing and why I only needed £20,000 to essentially turn it into Net-a-Porter, which is so not true. And and he invested this money and off I went, and I quickly ran through this cash, because although I was cash positive and I was making money and I'd hired staff and I was part of an accelerator at this point, and I thought, yeah, it's brilliant. I've got all of this money. £20,000 seemed like loads. Felt like I had loads of runway, and I absolutely didn't. It got to a point, I think it lasted me about 6 months, which again, in hindsight, I actually did pretty well out of £20,000. I was like, okay, I need to raise some more money. And I went back and I raised a little bit more. I think in a classic case of people who've never raised investment will maybe think I'll raise like little chunks of money because that's all I really need right now. And I raised another 30,000 again. I thought, this is great. I'm going to hire a PR agency. I'm going to have them on retainer. I'm going to do all these fantastic things. And again, I quickly ran out of cash. And it came to that point where I needed to fundraise again, and I had to also buy my stock in advance, and I had to pay for my stock up front. And it was incredibly stressful because I was only just turned 22 by this point and completely unprepared for the pressure of running your own business and trying to make my own salary as well as the salaries of other people, as well as running what I wanted to be a profitable business. And it all just got a bit too much, and I started to lose my hair, which was incredibly traumatic. And I went to the doctor thinking, I don't know what's wrong with me. And I told him, he was like, you've got stress-related alopecia. You're going to lose all your hair if you don't do something.
How did that feel?
Horrendous. I think I cried on the bathroom floor of my mum's house for about a solid 2 months. And just facing that reality of, oh my gosh, I've done something in my business that is so incredibly stressful and I've not looked after myself. And as a result, I'm going to lose my hair unless I take sort of a drastic change.
Yeah. So how did you go about making that change?
Because my symptoms were obviously so obvious, my doctor and my mum was like, right, you've got to do something about this. And I went to my investors and I spoke to my family about it and they were like, you've got to stop. Like, nothing is worth this. In the grand scheme of things, you'll have lost 50 grand and a few years of your time, but you've learned so much experience. And I was very fortunate that I was able to be in a position where I only left that business with debt that I chose to take on personally because I couldn't possibly cope with the fact that investors would potentially lose money. So I gave them their money back and I took essentially that funding on as debt and repaid them all of their money. And that made me feel a little bit better. So it was having some really hard conversations with myself and with my family and my investors and the people that were working for me at the time. And I'd done loads of press for my business and it was a really difficult pill to swallow to actually stand up and say, actually, you know what, this didn't work. But I've learned so much from that entire process that I don't regret any of the decisions that I made or the timing of anything. I still use those lessons in day-to-day life now, so I absolutely wouldn't change it.
How did it feel in yourself in your presentation when you went to see the investors the first time versus the second and third time?
I think with every time you present to investors, obviously the first time is filled with optimism and a healthy dose of naivety. The second time was a bit more, oh, hello, I'm back again. I need some more money, please. And then the third time, it was very much like, no, we're all grown-ups here. I need to have a really honest conversation with you about what's going to happen now and what I think's best for me and my health and also the future health of this business. You know, I don't want you guys to lose any money, which if you've raised money before, you'll know that raising for equity is not the same as raising for debt, which is, in the end is what I converted my equity into debt so that I could repay them. But yeah, I think the last time I went to see them was obviously when my hair started to fall out and I was hiding it at the time by tying back my hair and then I put my hair down and I had this big bald patch on the top of my head and I was like, I'm going to be really honest with you, I'm losing my hair here. I think we need to talk about where we're going to go next.
And how about employees? How many did you have at the time?
Including myself, I think on payroll we had 4 people, which again is not a huge amount, but it's 4 people that were relying on you to pay them money every month. And that it doesn't matter if you've got 1 person, 4 people or 50 people, you still as a founder have that weight on you of consciousness around, I've got to pay these people money at the end of the month and they're relying on me and what I'm doing in order to make money every month.
Yeah, I'm sure they were sympathetic though.
They were. And it was great. And I was able to, I did pay them all their salaries and kind of off they went. And I think I was lucky that in a way I realized a bit too late that I'd run out of cash, but then also at the same time early enough that I could resolve the situation by taking on essentially personal debt to pay it off, and I'll pay it back over a very, very long time. In fact, I've only recently finished paying that money off, and that was 7 years ago. So I knew what I was getting myself into, but I thought I would not be able to sleep at night if I thought that people had lost all this money, which I know I absolutely didn't legally need to do in any way. I just thought I can't do it any other way, so this is how it's going to be.
How about the recovery process? How long did that take and what kind of things did you need to do?
So the recovery process, I guess, in a way, never really ends. I would say it fully took me about 14 to 16 months to kind of mentally process what I'd done. It took me a long time to unpick all of the problems of all of the things that had gone wrong, because it's definitely not to say that finances was the only thing that contributed to that time in my life and the things that went wrong in our business. Also, sitting down and going back to people who had been involved with that business with me and asking them how I thought I could improve and what I could do differently. And meeting with other investors and other entrepreneurs who'd run successful businesses and sharing my story and being like, look, guys, this is what I did and this is how badly wrong it went. What did you do to make your business successful? Taking my time to understand, right, I always knew I was going to run my own business again. What was that business going to look like? And how was I going to learn from all of those mistakes? But then I've run sort of 3 subsequent businesses, and you learn so much on each one of those iterations. And I think if you're not making mistakes, and as long as you're learning from them, you're good.
And you're learning from them early, so.
Exactly. So yeah, I would say definitely at least a year to recover from a physical perspective and growing my hair back, because I'd lost huge clumps of it. Once that physical change had happened, things got much easier, because I could think, okay, well, I've not got this constant reminder when I look in the mirror of all the things that went so badly wrong for me.
Yeah, that must have felt like a real defining turning point almost.
It was because for quite some time I was able to hide the fact that I'd lost my hair from quite a lot of people, and I did, by like covering it up and wearing a hat and tying it back, and there's still actually loads of people who probably didn't even know, because I just literally cut them out of my life in terms of friends or personal contacts, and I just thought, I can't deal, I can deal with the weight and the embarrassment and the reality of maybe facing professional contacts and business associates, but things like old friends from school or so-and-so's mum that you pass on the street, I just thought, I do not have the strength to tell all these different people why I've lost all my hair and what's happened to me. I think especially because I was so high profiled in the press at the time, that reality from like, this is what the perception of me and what I was doing was, and then this behind the scenes was the actual reality of what was going on. So I covered it up pretty well, but it was such a relief when I didn't have to do that anymore, and I'd come to terms with the fact that everybody makes mistakes. Everyone fails a few times before they get it right. And I think, again, because I was so young, it took me a bit of time to come around to that, and I guess have the emotional intelligence and resilience to be able to deal with that.
So coming back to today, stress is pretty common among entrepreneurs. What kind of techniques do you have to manage it?
So stress is still something that I have, I guess, an ongoing relationship with, shall we say. I'm not going to say battle, I'll say relationship. It's something that I think I personally experience at different periods in a business's life cycle, and I think for me, always stress has come either as a result of something personal that happens in your life that can be very traumatic, that leads to, stress in other areas and you can't focus on your business, or stress because what's happening in your business. So in terms of how I try to manage that, I think first of all is just being really aware and open and honest of like, this is the reality, this is what's really going on, because if you know what's happening, you can manage it. I think the problems really arise when you hide from something and you bury your head in the sand, and it just becomes this awful thing that you're like, have this niggling feeling in the back of your head thinking, I should really sort that out. I need to do that thing about the money or about my staff or whatever it might be, that it kind of builds up in the background and it makes it so much worse. So I think my first thing that I do is I try and face things as head on as possible. I have a constant practice of like, okay, what am I not facing right now? And I actually have a post-it above my desk that says, are you hiding from anything? Are there any emails you don't want to send? Is there anything happening that you're avoiding? And then the second biggest shift that I've actually made pretty recently is completely separating my business and my personal life. I don't have any public social media platforms, so no one could like randomly follow me on Instagram. It's not my name on Facebook, so you could not connect with me on a personal level, which I know seems really extreme, but I find that helps, because it helps me have a divide between what goes on in my business and then what goes on in my personal life. And the same for a tiny shift, but just mobile phones. I have a completely separate business number to a personal number. So I have a personal, essentially like almost like a Nokia 3310 phone that my mum can call me on and my gran can call me on, and I can have it on over the weekend. And then Monday to Friday, I've got my business phone and people can contact me on that. But I think separating your communication as much as possible also, for me anyway, it really helps combat stress, and I know it's really helped a couple of other founders that I know as well.
I think people nowadays say that they want to follow the person rather than the brand, and it helps for the business owner to have their own presence on social media. So with the lack of personal social media presence, how do you get around that?
So I've actually recently had a case of having quite a big online social media presence, and I was doing Facebook Lives all the time, and I was the face of our brand, and in some respects that's absolutely great, and I had a fantastic connection with our audience, and if it's something that you can do, I definitely recommend it. For me personally, just not good for my own mental health. So I was like, I cannot do this, but I think it's so important for brands as a whole to have a presence on social media and make that as accessible and relevant for people as possible. But I think there's ways you can get around that if it's not right for one of the founders to be that face. And for me, I'm lucky that I'm also in business with a partner, so he can do that. But I totally appreciate what you're saying.
Coming back to the experience, I understand that you channeled what you learned from this experience into raising partners. So what lessons about raising investment did you learn, and how did you apply that to the business, both for yourself and for your clients?
I think the biggest lesson I learned from September Street was that there was so much conflicting advice in the market, and there were so many, different directions I could go in that it just didn't feel like there was somewhere I could go where someone could give me impartial advice. I would have saved myself a lot of time and pain and money, and potentially my business wouldn't have gone out of business.
For the benefit of our listeners, what kind of bad advice should you be aware of, and what common misunderstandings are there amongst entrepreneurs and business people?
Sure. So there's quite a few misconceptions about raising money, particularly if you've never done it before, because you put into Google how to raise investment, and quite often the first thing that comes up is loads of sites in America. I would say if you're in the UK funding landscape and the American funding landscape are completely different. The US is much more liberal in terms of they're happy to really invest on a whim and give you millions of pounds on a huge valuation for very little traction. It's not completely the opposite in the UK, but it's very, very different here in the sense that investors are much more risk averse. The second biggest, I guess, misconception or piece of bad advice is that you go and raise money. There's loads of money out there. Everyone's raising money. It's true. Everyone is raising money. And there is, in inverted commas, there is a lot of money in the market. There's actually less money in circulation in terms of liquidation and investments this year than there was last year. Brexit has a small role to play in that. Nervousness in the market, just like you would get in any financial market, but the conception that there's loads of money and that it's easy to get. The third one I would say is probably leads on for that is that it's a quick process. It's really not. I would say a minimum from start to finish, it's 4 months. It definitely takes time to do it, and you want to make sure that if you're looking for investment, you get the right investors on board and you don't back yourself into a corner where you just take money because you think, oh my God, I really need this and I just need this little bit of cash to get me through, because that's not a good position for you to be in. You want to plan an investment round strategically so you can take your time and get investors on board that you know and that you like and that you trust. I think that's really important, to give yourself enough runway. We always work with clients for a minimum of 4 months. Sometimes it can take 6 months. It's very much dependent on your stage of business and how much money you're looking to raise. But as a minimum, I would say that's kind of the ballpark area you want to be leaving it in. So if you're thinking, I need to raise money within the next 4 months, then you want to start doing it now.
Well, I'm sure our listeners will find that very useful. Thanks for coming in, Helena. You can find out more about Raising Partners at raisingpartners.com. You can also visit smallbusiness.co.uk for more guidance on different financing options for your business. While you're there, have a listen to fellow podcast guest Michael Rossman about how he secured his first round of seed funding. Until next time, thank you for listening.